Neuroscience and Education webinar series. We have a minute before we'll get started with our presentation. I'm Dr. Sarah Sawtelle with Learning Enhancement Corporation, and I am solely going to be the background moderator at this point. I want to welcome you all to the session and give you a little bit of information before we get started. Everyone that is calling in on the phone is being placed on mute as you enter, and the session is being recorded. The recording will be posted within a week of this session ending, and you will get an email when the recording is up, or you can just check back at our website where you registered. If you have a question during the session, please don't wait to ask it. You can type in the chat area over to the left, sorry, to the right, or you can type into the Q&A area over to the right, and I will be monitoring those as we progress. So now I'm going to introduce to you the President and COO of Learning Enhancement Corporation, who will be really asking the questions and working with our panelists. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our Neuroscience and Education webinar series. Joining me in sort of leading the conversation this afternoon is Dr. Lori Desautel, who teaches at Marian University in Indianapolis, and she also serves as a university supervisor and instructor for both the Indianapolis Teaching Fellows and the Teach for America program. So she spends lots of time with teachers and in classrooms and working with students. She has really extensive experience with emotionally handicapped students as a school counselor and also as a private practice counselor. Her passion is engaging her students through helping them understand the application of neuroscience in education. And we've had a number of webinars that are about how we incorporate neuroscience practices. But I thought it would be very interesting to hear, especially from some young teachers who are starting out their careers with an understanding of neuroscience sort of under their belt. I should also mention that Lori has a wonderful book called How May I Serve You, and I would highly recommend that. Joining Lori, hi Lori.
Hi Betsy, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks again for arranging this today.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, so joining Lori and me today are three amazing people who have worked with Lori in the process of getting their master's degrees at Marian University. And I cannot think of a better advertisement for that program than these accomplished, energetic, and very thoughtful educators. So I'm going to introduce them and sort of we'll check that our sounds are working and ask them each a question or so, and then we'll get the group going. So the first only because it's alphabetically first. I didn't know how to order you guys otherwise. Is Brad Crozier, and Brad is an assistant principal and Title I coordinator at Imagine Master Academy in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Oops, I can see that we left the T off the Fort Wayne on his slide, but sorry about that. And as I read about Brad, it became really clear to me that he is a true instructional leader as an assistant principal. He is involved in coaching teachers, classroom observations, really trying to incorporate brain-compatible teaching into their curriculum and their teaching processes, very involved on interventions for students. And he's been both a teacher and now moved in for the last 4 years into this leadership capacity. So Brad, are you there? Welcome.
I am, thank you.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into teaching and sort of how you got where you are today, just a little bit of background?
Yes, of course. I began teaching in a social studies classroom. I've spent my entire education career in public education within a charter school here in the city, and we serve a diverse group of students with a lot of needs, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. So over the years, I began as a social studies teacher, as you mentioned, and then went back to Marian University to pursue my leadership endorsements and my master's. And that's where I've met Lori and began to further delve into brain-based teaching strategies. And ultimately, in my position now, I have the opportunity to work with new and old teachers alike in how to best implement those same strategies into their classroom and to positively develop their curriculum. So it's been a great experience.
Wonderful. And the second teacher joining us today is, and I hope I'm going to pronounce her name right, Dia Nunnally. Dia,
yes,
are you there?
Yes.
Great.
Hello.
Dia is an English teacher at Pike High School in Indianapolis, where she's been for the last couple of years. She's teaching through the Indianapolis Teaching Fellows Program. She has over 10 years, although she certainly doesn't look like she's old enough in this picture to have had 10 years in college athletics as a coach and administrator. And she also incorporates brain-based activities, particularly to foster engagement and to stimulate higher order thinking. So I'm sure we're going to be talking about some of those things. And Dia, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into teaching?
Well, I was a graduate assistant working on my master's in English and really enjoyed the interaction with freshman and sophomore level students, but also saw at the college level a need to work on areas in the high school level specific to writing and reading comprehension. So the opportunity to join the Indianapolis Teaching Fellows came up as a result of my husband having gone through it as well. And I jumped at the opportunity to get in the classroom with students at the high school level. I teach English 10, 11, and 12 at Pike High School, and have really just enjoyed going through the ITF program, and especially working with Dr. Lori on brain-based strategies, really paying attention to social and emotional learning. So this is all just an opportunity for me to strengthen what I love to do anyway, which is to teach.
Wonderful. And the third of our trio of teaching participants today is Austin. And if you were French, I pronounced it Ange, but I'm guessing it's probably Ing or Inga? Inge. Oh, okay. Well, fourth time is makes perfect. Teaches sixth grade math at Lincoln Middle School in Indianapolis, and he also serves as their head track coach. So we've got a couple of athletics folks here at least. But I also, when I was looking at his profile on LinkedIn, came across the fact that he is also trained as a weather forecaster. And it's absolutely gorgeous weather here today in Chicago. I don't know about where anybody else is. So, Austin, I guess we have you to thank for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into this profession?
Actually, mine was sort of a roundabout way. I was in undergrad getting a weather degree, and I had a summer job as a mentor for a program called Summer Bridge, and that's actually at IPFW up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the 3 years I worked there, I really got a passion for working with kids and helping them with the transition from high school to college. And I went ahead and finished my undergrad degree and thought, oh, that was fun. I can move on with my life now. But I couldn't get rid of that feeling. And I began coaching track at the high school level, and I knew I had to get more into it. So that's when I decided to join Teaching Fellows and ended up going through the process, became a teacher. And I thought I was crazy for doing it, but it's been the most rewarding job I've had in my entire life.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. We need a lot more people who have that passion. So let's start talking a little bit about sort of teaching practices, and again, bearing in mind our title of our webinar today about what it feels like to do brain-compatible teaching. So any one of you who wants to start, talk a little bit about what it was like when you first stepped into a classroom, or when you step into the classroom at the beginning of the year. How do you try to connect with your students and understand them? Would one of you like?
Oh,
go ahead.
This is Dia. The first thing I like to establish is a sense of community and an opportunity to connect with each other and me connect with them. and really use, especially initially, things like novelty, like, coming in and saying, okay, everybody, I need you to line up in order without telling each other how old you are by your birth date, something like that, where it just immediately gets their brain engaged. And so that's fun, those icebreakers at the beginning of semester to build that sense, again, of community, and it adds to the classroom culture as well.
Brad or Austin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Kind of like what Dia does, just try to do icebreakers on the first day or first couple weeks of school, and even something like picking your own seat, so I can see who's comfortable in what area of the classroom and what kids they're comfortable with. And sometimes I'll try to throw a wrench in there and say, you picked all your own seats. Now I want you to switch. Everybody on the left side get to the right side, everyone on the right to the left, and they either have to walk backwards or they have to skip or they have to whistle a tune while they go, just to try to make it different from what they're used to.
That clearly sets the tone that this is going to be a school year like no other they've experienced, doesn't it? Brad, how about you?
Yes, I would add, adding to Austin and Dia's comments there, one thing we've always committed ourselves to doing, and something I've, really learned early on in my teaching was initially letting kids know that you are a partner with them and that you believe in their success. I think so often a lot of our kids come in with so many different stress factors in their life, so many different past experience, that they come in predetermined that they might fail or should fail because of all these past experiences. So really, as a school, we've tried to build that sense of community, as the other panelists have mentioned, and also to really let kids know that we are here to support them and that they can and will be successful given their effort, and we're going to come right alongside them in doing that. So I think that's a big component of those first few days or first few weeks of school as well.
This is Dee, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to piggyback on what Brad said, because it reminded me of something that I like too with self-assessments at the beginning of a semester, to let them identify for themselves, with me as their only audience, how they see themselves relative to study skills or cognitive skills, but also, kind of those non-cognitive executive functioning skills, to let me know how to teach over the next couple of weeks to, do I need a lot of repetition in it? So those self-assessments from them, I think, are critical in this time period.
Boy, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Now, Lori, you have written a lot about students living with stress and how apathetic and dejected and lack of self-confidence they can become. And it sounds like all three of these have sort of picked up on that and are really incorporating that. Can you maybe suggest some of the things that you suggest that they focus on, and then maybe the students can react and give some examples of how they have implemented those suggestions?
Absolutely. The stress that the students are feeling, in fact, at the conference this weekend from Dr. Sam Goldstein, he actually quoted, children who live in poverty have high cortisol levels. And this is, well researched. So when we look at how that's affecting the brain and that fight-flight response, then we know, and this is what we've shared, in our coursework, that, the teaching cannot happen when they're in that state of mind. So some of the things that we've talked about this semester, actually this past year, because Brad was with me last summer, we've talked about ways of just lessening the stress and giving them, some deeper breaths. And one of the things that we've talked about is actually breathing, is actually helping them to just stop, to just take some deep breaths, to just try to clear their mind, even if it's for a moment, of all the thoughts that are in there, all the happenings and experiences that they bring into the classroom from so many different environments they come from. And also, I think one of the most important strategies that we can give them is to give them feedback that is immediate, that is very, very informative, and that is that ratio of 4 to 1, where we notice some very positive happenings and experiences, and even if it's hard to find those 4, finding that positive and reporting that back to them, so important. And all of these teachers, I'm just sitting here just enjoying, I didn't even want to join in, I just wanted to listen, are doing such a great job with understanding the importance and significance of stress, in the lives of our students today and teachers.
So have you guys, Austin or Dia or Brad, have you used that breathing technique? Is that something that you actually do with your students? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Actually, yeah, that's something I use probably on a daily basis. And I actually learned it from Dr. Desautels. She had us talking about it in class a few times. And basically what we do after we do our bell ringer for the day, I'll have the kids do what we call tactical breathing. And it goes by their names, repetition breathing or pattern breathing. But basically we sit there, sit up straight, breathe in on a 4 count through your nose, take a nice deep full breath and hold it, and then we breathe out on a 4 count through our mouths. And we'll do 2 or 3 rounds of that, and then I'll tell them what the agenda for the day is. And it seems at first the kids kind of didn't want to do it. They laughed at it. But the actual tone of the room calms down from the hustle and bustle of walking in. And I even pushed it to the end of the class, too, because I noticed kids leave the classroom and they run through the halls. They get into fights. They yell at each other. So trying to get the kids to calm themselves down before the bell rings has actually kind of helped at least my end of the hallway during passing periods. So that's definitely something that I do as much as possible.
That sounds great. You need to talk to the teachers down at the end of the hall, I think.
One of the things, this is Dia, that I appreciated from that portion of the course with Dr. Desautels was the focus on teachers taking that moment for themselves too, because you have to unpack your baggage before you go into the classroom, and you have to really be kind of an open vessel while you're in there. In order to do that, you can't carry stuff in, and so being able to breathe as a teacher before you walk in the classroom or between passing periods, because I have 6 minutes, so I have to be able to breathe myself. So I just wanted to add that.
Makes a lot of sense, and I imagine, Brad, that you, because you're dealing with all of the teachers within your building, that stress for the teachers is probably an issue as well as stress for the students. And are there ways like breathing or other strategies that you've been able to use that you think help you?
Well, for me in my position, I think the best stress reliever for teachers, in the way I often interact with teachers, is just being that sounding board and listening to their thoughts and feelings regarding a student or an issue in a class or something like that. So I haven't had the experience to necessarily work with the breathing, but I'm in classrooms enough that we can have honest conversations. So, a lot of going to eliminate some of those stress factors, some of those things that cause anxiety in the classroom are positive relationships. So, so often, teachers are developing those with students. I have to work in my position to be able to develop those same positive relationships with teachers so that they trust in coming in and talking to me, and that we can have quality conversations that are going to build them up. So, that's sort of where I come at that angle from where I'm at.
Yeah.
And Beth, can I add in? I want to add to what Brad just said too, because, and Dia brought this up. This is the stress that the teachers are feeling. It's great. I mean, it's great in the amount, not great that they're experiencing the stress. but we know, and I think we talked about this before, that when any of us can write out our worries, can write out our concerns, or to talk those out. And you know, Brad talked about this, saying, you know, if you establish a positive relationship with your staff, with your faculty, where there is a real feeling of comfort and knowing that you can come in and, you know, express, you know, what's happening, what your thoughts and feelings are, you know, we really do free up, you know, our thought process. The working memory has capacity to, you know, hold more information, and that's just as true for teachers as it is for students. So, you know, when we've given students the exercise of writing out their worries and angst and concerns before an assignment or before class begins, I think the same thing is very, very true for teachers, you know, whether that's through conversation or, you know, through a written, you know, kind of a fun written exercise at a staff meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, and it's, I think, you know, it's not just, you know, whether it's fun. There's actually, as you think you mentioned, a lot of research that says that
absolutely.
Writing about before a stressful exam or something like that can actually increase performance, and just for all the reasons that you stated. Is that for the teachers, is that something that seems to be particularly helpful when it comes to test time? Do you see a lot of stress in students and yourselves at those times of the year?
Is that for me? No, go ahead, Dia.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I teach English, and we write a lot. And I incorporate prompts, journal entries that are very attuned to their stress and anxiety, whether it's for my class and a test in my class or managing just the workload of being a high school teenager. So that is definitely something that I use, because being able to get that out in that form helps their brain too.
We've also, in my school, just, you know, recently, in light of taking the I-STEP, so, you know, high stakes as they come when you're talking about summative assessments, what we've done as a school is pretty simple, but we've offered hot breakfast to all students, and we've delayed the start of the testing to 9 o'clock in the morning versus 8:30. So trying to just alleviate some of those stress factors, you know, eliminate students coming in hungry. Sometimes those are things that happen that we don't recognize on a daily basis. So we take that out of the mix, and then just sort of lengthening the time of being able to come in, be restful, and get ready for the test. We've seen a lot of success in that. So.
Great. That's great. So, of course, everybody likes stories, and Lori's book is full of stories, but I'm sure each of you has some of yours. Can you each think of a particular student that you have worked with, and you don't need to use names, you can just say, you know, just characterize them, where you were really able to draw on your experience and your grounding in how the brain learns and that sort of thing to help them? And again, anybody who wants to has their story at the tip of their tongue or wants to start is welcome to do so.
Yeah, this is Dia. I have a student in mind who initially was very, how do I say it, response, you know, lack of kind of control, and spoke out a lot in class at not good times, disruptive, but just so, and so I had to figure out what was going on. And I gave her an executive skills packet for her to fill out and let her know that I was working on a project at school and could she help me out. And when I asked her that and said to help me out and shared with her what it was, there was like an immediate connection. She took it home and she filled it out, and so did her mother. And I got the feedback, and from that point forward, our relationship kind of connected and blossomed, and it was revealed to me that She, is able to go to a resource class to get extra help. Her behavior in class changed. I moved her closer to me. I communicated more often to ensure, that we were, connected and continuing to connect. And I've seen within the past, I'll just say month or so, just a blossoming, and it's just so gratifying to see the growth. She's on top of things. When she speaks up in class, it's on my behalf at the beginning of class, telling students to please be quiet and not being afraid to do it, So that was one on the tip of my tongue.
Well, that's great, and that's probably teachers are much more familiar these days with the term executive functions. And in fact, Dr. Lori and Dr. Sarah and I just all got back from a weekend-long conference on executive functions where nobody could quite agree on the definition, but kinds of the actions and behaviors that Dia was just talking about are, just classical examples of that, where there is a lack of control and self-regulation. So speaking out and, being disorganized and all those kinds of things are typical symptoms. So it sounds like you were really able to pinpoint some issues that were, that aren't all this was the things that teachers pay attention to that really were getting in the way of the students' learning and being a productive member of the class.
Yes.
Brad or Austin?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share one example. I had a kid that I struggled with at the beginning of the year where he just did not like math. And I guess that's common with a lot of people. Math can be a struggle. He would come in and either just put his head down for the whole period, or if he was up, he was making noise. And I changed some things with how I did my bell work. I added movement to it. So instead of kids just writing a math problem on a piece of paper and us discussing it, we turned it into create a dance for this math problem. Or if I had one with a number line, instead of putting a number line on the board, I put one on the floor, and they could do dance moves to show me how to get from, say, +5 to -2. And then by that, we could figure out, well, what's the answer? What's 5 plus -2? So this student, as we started doing these things, he went from either the distraction or the disengaged into the class leader. He wanted to lead the bell work, or he wanted to demonstrate in front of the class. And the most positive thing I've gotten from this was he's getting better remarks from other teachers in his other classes. So he's not getting written up, he's not getting kicked out, because he wants to make sure he's present by the time he gets to my class 4th period. Otherwise, he's suspended, and in ISS before that, he doesn't get to participate in math class. So at this point in the year, we have a great relationship, and I think that is in part that I found something that he's good at that he can relate to math class. So we made a connection.
That's a great story, and it should remind us that all of us have our cognitive strengths and weaknesses. All of us have ways that we hear and learn, and that there are lots of different ways to access the information that we have. And it's not always writing it on a piece of paper on a board, but sometimes it's getting up and, as you said, moving it. You're expressing it with your body and giving students the alternative to express what they know, what they're learning, what they're thinking about in a variety of ways is a way to really reinforce learning.
And then I'll jump in here and share a story as well. Going back a few years ago now, the 7th grader still sticks out in my mind as a young male 7th grade student. And when you talk about external factors impacting a student, this young man faced anything and everything, and he was sitting, this was just as I stepped into a leadership role. He was down in my office for behavior-related things going on in the classroom, and we're just talking about what's going on, and I could just tell that, again, he didn't believe he could be successful, and I know I brought this up before, but until we get students believing that they can be successful, we're fighting such an uphill battle. So that really became the focus of my first year or so in administrative leadership. And we, as a staff, implemented some new things just to help kids see that there's purpose in what they're doing now, and it connects to future goals. So we implemented some career and college planning things that we haven't done before, just to get kids thinking about the future, and they could connect with, well, why am I taking math class now? Well, it's because I want to do this later in my life. And for the kids that haven't begun thinking about that, we did a lot of different things to help open their eyes to different possibilities. And then recognizing their performance along the way, we implemented a communication card, we call it a C card, where we recognize students for positive behavior as well as other things on that. And getting back to Lori's point before about a 4-to-1 ratio, when as a staff we tracked the comments that we were giving kids through this communication card, it was most successful when we were, as a staff, giving out 3 positives to 1, I guess you could call a negative comment on the C card. So as a staff, we really looked at that and strived hard to get to a 3-to-1 level is what it was for us, so that we could recognize students being successful and help them grow.
So maybe, could you talk a little bit more about that? I'm not sure if everyone's in fact, I'm not completely familiar with the concept of a C card. And maybe talk a little bit about how you were able to track these numbers.
Yeah, essentially it is half sheet of paper on cardstock, and it has openings or cells. Basically, it's sort of like an Excel spreadsheet for each period of the day. And then we have a code of different things that students are recognized for. So they might be recognized for being on task, or recognized for positive engagement in the classroom, or showing kindness in the classroom. And it's a common language between teachers and students, but then it's also something that goes home to parents as well. And it's sort of a first level thing, when parents are beginning to wonder, well, why might my student be struggling in class? That communication card allows us to open those lines of communications between parents and students and teachers. But in implementing it, what we really want to do is affirm the positive behavior that we're seeing within the students, and that was a big point of what we were doing there.
Okay, so you've all mentioned, talked about feedback and creating that level of trust, and it sounds like there's feedback that's happening both around behaviors, that is how we do what we do, as well as scholastic accomplishments. Am I interpreting your comments correctly? Does anybody want to elaborate on that?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in just for a minute, because when we look at the feedback, the aspect of feedback and how that is brain compatible, just kind of looking at the alignment of that, we've all heard the term feedback forever, but I am actually just learning this past semester the true, benefits of how it literally shapes our neural circuitry when feedback is given in specific ways. And, that, again, as mentioned, when we notice, not necessarily praise. The praising is really not what I'm including when I talk about feedback that drives connection and drives instruction. I'm talking about feedback that, really is authentic in how the students know that we are attentive and focused on them because we've noticed specific aspects of their work or behavior. And I think that's really, really important. So I've been using that with all of my undergrad and grad students in the classroom. So I'm hoping that that's clear, because it's not only immediate, but and it's not necessarily positive or all warm and fuzzy, but it's very focused, and it says to the student, I'm right here with you, I see what you're doing, and this is what I'm noticing, and these are some thoughts that I might have that might make it a little smoother for you, or again, I really like how you've handled this situation.
I'd like to add, too, that it's a cycle that helps also to create the classroom culture. When you talk to them about accountability, you hold them accountable for their actions in a very, honest and I would say positive way, because you don't shame the students individually or within the class with put downs as a teacher. You know what I'm talking about. You have to definitely keep that communication positive and accountable, but firm and clear. That behavior was unacceptable. Class, what do you guys think? Include the class in accountability measures, and I ask students to hold me accountable as well, and so they see that it's not just one-sided, and then they buy into what that really means, I think, more too.
So can you tell us an example of a student holding you accountable, Dia?
Oh, all the time. When am I getting my papers back? I'm being facetious there. But in terms of units, I ask them at the end of a unit, tell me, did I give you what you needed to perform your best on this? And I do it with each unit because I want to know, how can I get better at this? But I want to learn about how you're processing also what we went through, what you were paying attention to. But again, they tell me. And sometimes I want their feedback on a lesson or what we should do considering what we need to get done according to the standards or the curriculum. So, they're holding me accountable to give them what they're supposed to get, and I'm holding them accountable. So it's kind of that cycle.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to make sure we had a little time to talk about what Brad is doing in his building with his teachers, because he's also taken up the mantle of helping teachers understand something about brain research and how it should apply. So, Brad, could I ask you to talk a little bit about that for a minute?
Yes, absolutely. We began the year with just professional development as it relates to brain-based teaching, and one of the main components of the early on professional development was helping teachers understand the process in which learners are motivated, engaged, and then how to properly assess them. So we have a lot of ongoing supports. Mainly that comes through, we have weekly staff meetings in which we often incorporate professional development into those, but then being in the classroom, it's really the most effective way for me to work with a teacher. I get to see what they're doing. At times I model different engagement strategies, different lesson hooks, and so on. And it's an ongoing cycle from there.
Great. So now I'm going to ask you to become old and wise in the space of about 30 seconds, and and ask you to think about new teachers, and maybe Brad, I'm sure, is working with new teachers, but maybe Austin and Dia, you are as well. So what would you tell, or what do you tell new teachers or other teachers that would help them when they get into a classroom? And, those first year or two of teaching can be pretty overwhelming, but what's your advice to them?
Yeah, I'll jump in and start this off. One of the ongoing conversations that I'm always having with new teachers, I feel that so often sometimes teachers, young and old, get wrapped up in managing behaviors versus engaging students. And when we solely focus on managing behaviors, and that's the focus of our 45 minutes, 55 minutes with the classroom, and we don't put the time and effort to create a really engaging activity that's going to draw them in, that has that novelty, that has that movement, it's such a struggle. So that's my biggest work with teachers, is you have to move beyond some of those behaviors and ask yourself, well, how am I going to create such an engaging project that's going to eliminate the behaviors on its own? So we often have those discussions.
And could you give us an example of some things that you've seen teachers do that you were particularly impressed with that really brought that level of engagement to the classroom?
Definitely. We recently had a professional development within our Tuesday night meetings in which we talked about sort of that hook of a lesson. So how do you draw students in? And this was really brought back by one of our other leadership team members here, our school principal, and we talked a lot about first teaching a concept in a language that they would understand. So students have to be able to make a connection to the material. And the example we were using is compare and contrast. So often as teachers, we sort of teach that at a book level or at a test level, but kids don't, you want them to be able to see it in their world first. So one example is just sort of really unique, and I love the idea that was brought back to our staff, and then I've seen and sort of observed and helped teachers in implementing it. It was a picture, one of those pictures of like a hamburger or a cheeseburger that you would see on a commercial versus what it actually looks like when it's served to you at the restaurant. And so that was then shared with kids, and they understood the idea of comparing and contrasting through something that they've experienced in their life. Now there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but that's one way that we've specifically taught some brain-based strategies. How do you put that novelty in there and connect to their prior experiences and then go from there. So that's one thing that we've done recently.
I love that one. I think that is just, anyone who has ever bought a hamburger at a fast food place knows exactly what that's like, and that visceral emotional connection with that beautiful picture versus the actual what you get is just really a wonderful way to involve students' emotions in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it went over really well in the classroom, and I could talk about more examples of how we've worked with teachers to do similar things, but that's a big focus for us. So that'd be my advice to new teachers coming in.
Austin, how about you? You had your example of your bodies moving across the number line on the floor. Are there some other examples of activities that you have found to be really engaging for students?
There's a list. I like to throw things, and teaching middle school, if you ever offer a kid a ball and say, hey, throw this at that kid, they're going to be more excited than anything you've ever seen. So I do a tennis ball toss, and what that is, we just practice our times tables or our basic math facts, division, addition, subtraction, and multiplication. And it'll be something as simple as the whole class is in a circle. Here's a tennis ball. You give them a multiplication problem, call out the student's name. So one kid will say, hey, Brian, 4 times 4. Throw a tennis ball across the room at him. And by the time Brian catches the ball, he needs to say 16 and then pick another student. And we've even increased the rigor by adding 3, 4, 5 tennis balls so kids understand, hey, I have to make sure I'm listening and watching, otherwise I'm going to get hit with a tennis ball. That's one other movement activity. We did another one where we did ski jumps. Same thing, practicing our basic math facts. And that's something you can do as a bell work, or something where halfway through a lesson about algebra, you see kids losing it, say, hey, let's take a brain break. Everybody stand up, and I'm going to give you some math facts. When you know the answer, jump in the air and say the answer. Land back down. And those are kind of things that I throw in the middle of a lesson, at the end of a lesson, just to kind of switch it up and keep kids physically engaged. And I did want to add one thing, what advice to give to new teachers. I would say just be genuine, because my first year I tried to walk in there and put on this facade of, oh, I'm this teacher and I know so many things and you need to listen to me, but that's not my personality. So This year, I think I've relaxed a little more. I let myself come out, and that's why I do the jumping in the classroom, the tossing of the tennis balls, because those are things that interest me, and I find myself kind of childish, I guess, on the weekends, and I assume 12-year-olds can probably relate. And if I can get a kid to do math problems with a smile on their face, I think I've accomplished something for the day. If I have them leaving with a frown or waking up as the bell rings, then I did not reach that kid. So just be genuine, and if you're genuine, kids will relate to you, whether you have the same personality or not. That's my piece of advice for new teachers.
And Austin, don't you think that they know when you're not being authentic and genuine?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they pick up on it so fast. You cannot fake a middle school kid. They know. They know when you want to laugh when something happens. They know when you're upset and you try to blow it off. So you just have to be yourself, but show them that yourself is also an educator. So even though I'm a younger teacher, I still have to show my students, hey, I may be in my 20s, but I still carry myself professionally while I'm at work. So, yeah, I still talk about math. I still keep my shirt tucked in throughout the entire day. Little things like that, they're watching. They're watching you as a role model, whether they like you or not. They're watching you.
Right. So all of you have talked about really listening to and getting feedback from your students and trying to improve and do things better. So I know it's hard to think about it because you're just getting to the end of a school year and you probably just want to sit and take those 5 deep breaths. But as you start to think about next year, what are some things that each of you has in mind that you might want to do differently?
Everything?
Yeah. I know that with the self-assessments, especially related to the executive skills kind of self-assessments, I did those kind of on a pilot basis at the end, kind of mid-semester. I'll start the year out with that. I will also start the year out with the breathing. And, the first probably 2 to 3 minutes of class will be very focused on kind of social emotional concepts in the daily activity. So being more proactive in that.
Where I'd like to see our school grow, and just assessing how things went last year, I think we lacked in this area. But getting back to more authentic assessments in which students are given the opportunity to present to their peers, to people within our community, or engage in some real practical project-based learning. I think as a staff, we slipped a little bit from that, although we might be doing engaging stuff in the classroom. I want to see some more authentic sort of end-of-unit projects for students to be involved in.
With me, I'd say everything, because every year it's going to be totally different, but my main focus is definitely going to have to be on my classroom procedures. I can do all these things with the tennis balls through the air, but if I don't have deliberate and clear procedures and what I expect in my room, it does not go well. So I'm not going to lie, there are class periods where the tennis ball does not leave my desk because my procedures were not clear enough with that period from day one to where we cannot do those kind of things. And that's something that from the first day of school through the first weeks, next year I want to make sure that I am much more clear on what I expect and what needs to happen once you enter my classroom until the time you leave my classroom.
That's great. What was inherent in some of those comments was really helping students understand that I guess I'm thinking about the whole notion of the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And when you focus on their skills right now and where they want to get, it sounds like there's a real emphasis here on helping students appreciate the fact that learning and getting better at some of these skills it's not just what they were given when they came into the world, but that they can actually work and develop them. Is that something that you talk explicitly about, or it just comes out through the kinds of activities that you engage with your students.
Betsy, I just want to say one thing to that, and then I want them to speak individually. But one of the things that we've talked about this year is the reteaching, and maybe actually not even the reteaching, but the teaching of these non-cognitive skills, which are those executive functions, whatever you call them, because we don't hesitate to teach academic skills. We rehearse, we practice, we reteach, we drill. But one of the things we've talked about this semester in the collaboration class is not hesitating to look at those skills of planning and organizing and taking initiative and task completion and emotional regulation, goal setting. Those are the things that we assume that many of our students have been taught, or at least that they know as much to take the first or second step, but that's not always the case. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be integrating more in all of my courses next year, using teacher examples and having them come in and reflect and sharing some very specific instances where those sub-skills really needed to be rehearsed and practiced.
Thanks, Lori. Any of the three want to get started with this?
Well, this is, project-based learning, and I'm glad Brad mentioned that. And it's just all of those skills are used, and you're modeling the behavior, and you're kind of, micromanaging initially, but by the end of the semester, they're doing it. They're coming together. They're having to meet deadlines. They're having to talk to each other. They're working on speaking and listening standards. And when they're presenting, there's so much, growth that I've seen from the beginning of a unit to the end. And then I get to ask higher order thinking skill questions. And so it's kind of like something that's in practice, that, moves from theory to practice, and it's great. And I use project-based learning in as many units as I can.
One thing, I'm very familiar with Carol Dweck's work on that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and we ask a lot of interview questions surrounding that and really look at that. If you come in as a teacher not believing that certain kids can be successful, then you've already written them off and you're not doing the students any service. So we've really integrated a lot of questions into our interview process about that. And then throughout the year, we want students to see their growth so that they see their path towards success. And again, if we're looking at next year and how do we improve, I think it would be that piece of students really owning their data, seeing that their proficiency on a certain standard is increasing, or whatever skill we're looking at. So that would be something that we would want to continue to develop within our school.
One thing we do as far as goal setting, most teachers, they set some sort of big goal at the beginning of the class or whatever, and my students decided they wanted to average an 85% on every assessment. So what we took that was, with the other math teacher in the building in 6th grade, we compete with them. So every exam, we take our class averages, and we post the average in the main hallway in 6th grade. And at the beginning of the year, before we competed with the other teacher, per se, the students really didn't care. Oh, we averaged a 71. Oh, well, we'll get better next time. But when we started comparing with other classes, they took that on themselves as, hey, we can do better than them because we work harder in here than they do. And it kind of gave them more of a, motivation to want to reach that goal. And I think what I'd like to do next year, or maybe as a whole building, maybe have the kids set personal goals. We don't have to post their personal scores in the hallway, but keep track of them in their binder or in their journals and show, hey, I'm showing improvement. My goal was a 95 on a test. Hey, I hit that goal by February. What can I do now? And just encouraging goal setting, because that's a skill for life. That's something you need as an adult.
Okay. And I really love the idea, Austin, of competing at that class level, because then you get the sense of belonging to your classroom and a little bit of peer pressure, and we're in this together. We're a community. We're a team. We can do this all together, and so nobody can just sort of sit back and say, I don't want to be part of this. Sarah, do we have any questions that anybody has typed in the chat window at this point?
We have a couple. One that just popped in is one that I think you all can address in a relatively short period of time, and it does take us a little bit away from our theme of how it feels to be teaching in a brain-compatible way, but in many ways it doesn't. And the question is, how are you dealing with Common Core as you're doing all of this brain-compatible teaching?
Well,
and you're all speechless.
No,
yeah.
The standards are a part of a framework, and I think if you conceptualize it and then kind of see it as something that is supposed to help as opposed to something getting in the way, it lessens the anxiety. Is there anxiety? Yes, but it can be something that you can work with to benefit the students, because that's what it's supposed to be for. So for me, it's been a mindset more than anything. But there is, as everybody knows, the anxiety of implementation and the challenges as a result of the administrative impacts on your time to focus on students.
Mm-hmm. I want to add to what Dia said, Betsy, real quickly, because I think the Common Core standards that I really looked at and just kind of delved into are they're very much in alignment with brain-compatible approaches and strategies. And I think what it's going to take is, and if we're talking about just looking at the specific standards, they really address some very critical problem-solving and creative skills that tie into multiple intelligence. So I like them. I think that there's a lot of growth, but the thing that's going to make the difference is teacher buy-in and how they're presented to students. Because if there's and that goes back to that mindset again. What is teacher's mindset? How are we presenting these in a way where right off the bat, students are, going to be somewhat intrigued and hopefully engaged.
And this is Sarah, and what, to me, what I hear you all saying and what I know about brain-compatible teaching is that it's really about engaging into a higher-order thinking process, which really fits really well with the Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
I would echo the same thing, having, being most familiar with sort of the science and social studies Common Core standards. It pushes teachers to focus on the cognitive skills versus on the facts and the dates of when an event happened. So I really, they align with the way in which I teach, because they force you to those higher level skills, and then to connect to the literature and the language arts class. I like them for upper grades. So.
This is Betsy again. I was going to say that I think that what the Common Core is doing is ask us to help our students get to higher order thinking. And it doesn't tell us how to do that, but when you're talking about thinking processes themselves and the development and the maturation of students and their abilities to do that, that's really about how their brains are maturing and developing and how they're acquiring and practicing those skills. And so the kinds of things that Austin and Dia and Brad have talked about today that they're already doing in their classrooms, to me, are beautiful exemplars of brain-compatible teaching that is very consistent with and really supportive of what we're going to be expected to do with the Common Core standards. So they were doing it before they got, the stamp of approval from the various states. And I think that it's not just for them, those instructional shifts have really already started because that's how they were trained and that's how they've started out their practice in their profession. So if anybody wants to have any more comments on that, I certainly would welcome them. If not, was there a second question, Sarah?
Yeah, but it really takes us away from our theme, and it's going to take way too long to discuss. And it was a question about the fact that, while this is interesting, getting more of research-based, free, high result-yielding brain-compatible strategies, which we've talked about in other presentations that weren't about feeling what it feels like when you're teaching it, which is, in my opinion, fabulous.
Right.
So I had to describe it in one word.
Today we're trying to look at the other side of it. So, and actually it looks like we're actually at 3:30. I have a couple more that I could put in, but I'm not going to have time. Anybody want to make any last comment? Everybody gets one more chance to say something before we wrap up.
I would just say that the brain compatible stuff that we do in our classrooms, it's not something that we do every single day, but it's just a good way to switch up what the kids are used to. Anything gets old after a long time. Smiley face stickers don't have the same effect after the 5th or 6th test. So just doing something different with the kids is a good way to keep them re-engaged as you go throughout the school year. And it keeps you alive as a teacher. You'll go crazy without it.
Right. Novelty is one of those basic principles of brain-compatible teaching. So you can have a smiley face, Austin.
Exactly.
Okay. Dia or Brad?
I would just go ahead, Dia.
No.
Well, I was just going to thank you for the opportunity, and then, really just encourage any other teachers out there, continue to talk with your students and get their feedback. Dia talked a lot about assessing students and having students doing self-assessments. They're going to tell you how they learn best, and then you have to be responsive and flexible to adjust to their needs. And I think that's the biggest thing. As long as you're reflective in your craft and willing to do things a little differently and try things differently, you're on the right path. So you'll figure out just what works best for you as you go, but you have to be open to the concept first.
Excellent. Growth mindset. Okay. Dia, you get the chance to.
I would just say what Austin and Brad said, and make sure that you breathe and you make your classroom environment one that you would like to be in every day too.
Well, I wish that we could have everybody off of mute, that we could all stand up and give you a very enthusiastic round of applause, because this was a wonderful and engaging conversation. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Dia. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Lori. And thank you all, everybody who is participating today, and we will hope to see you at another neuroscience and education webinar very soon. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Oh, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.